It has been a year since I made my video describing my thoughts on Sonic Forces, and it's been just over a year since the release of the game itself, and of course my return to this channel with my theory video on Infinite. Now, in all honesty, compared to most Infinite theory videos, I still think mine holds up. The only thing I said in it that was wrong was when I mentioned about how Infinite would probably turn against Eggman, which he didn't do in Sonic Forces. Spoiler alert if you haven't played it already, but yeah, there's no Infinite betrayal. And that is something I would like to talk about in this video. So with this video, I am going to focus primarily on Infinite, because the last time I talked about him as a character was before his debut game was released. So, without further ado, let's talk about Infinite. I remember when Sonic Forces first came out, that so many people were disappointed in Infinite's character. And to be honest, so was I. I was also very disappointed in Infinite's character because there was a lot of hype surrounding him. So some people might not have been there for the hype, but I'm sure many of you watching this were there. But Sega basically advertised the heck out of Infinite. Anything to do with Sonic Forces had that masked jackal right on it. Anything you looked at. In the trailers, he was there. In the E3 trailer, he took up most of the screen time, basically, just by being there. He had this reveal trailer thrown out. He had this music theme thrown out. Everything was just, Blair, look at this character. He's our new character, like him. And because of all the advertising, fans were convinced he was going to be a big deal. So, I guess I'll compare it to Sonic Boom. Let's look at Sonic Boom and Sonic Forces. So when Sonic Boom was released, there wasn't a massive thing about Lyric, for example. So Lyric was the antagonist of Sonic Boom Rise of Lyric. His name is in the title, for goodness sake. But there wasn't much advertising for his character. Or Styx. Styx was a major character who was advertised, but she was not advertised to the extent Infinite was. So all this Infinite stuff being shoved in our faces made us all believe he was going to be a big deal. But those of us who then played the game were immediately disappointed. And yes, including myself. Because everything basically amounted to nothing. So, in my video, which I talked about at the start of this one, I talked about how Infinite was going to be a new Mephiles, which he did feel like. And I talked about how he'd most likely betray Eggman. Because let's face it, every time there's a big, scary bad guy, they always betray Eggman. Now, looking back, I do appreciate Sonic Forces for not following that predictable formula. Oh, look, Eggman's taking over the world, but just as he's getting there, oh, his greatest ally turns against him. It broke that formula. His greatest ally was loyal to him until the very end. But my question is, why? Of all characters who could have turned against Eggman, why did Infinite not do it? There were so many red flags throughout the game that he was going to do things his own way at some point, but instead he was basically just floating after Eggman so loyally it was frightening. So the red flags in the game that I noticed mainly were the reactions from characters like Orbot and Cubot. They're both loyal to Eggman as well, but they show great fear of Infinite. Why would they be afraid of someone who's on their side? Who knows? Probably because he's not too loyal. The second red flag was how he basically didn't do things the right way. So, for example, when Infinite lets Sonic live, I can't remember, it's been a while since I played through the game properly, but he came back to Eggman and said, look, I've let them live, there's no concern, whatever. And Eggman's like, no, you moron, that's not what you were supposed to do, you were supposed to kill them. But Infinite didn't. He basically disobeyed Eggman by not doing the direct thing he wanted him to do. And that was again another red flag. And the third red flag, which is the last one I can really think of at the top of my head, was how Eggman treated him. So again, in that cutscene, Eggman's sort of, oh, you fool, why did you not kill them? It's all your fault now. And the way Eggman insulted him before he even became Infinite as well. So for those of you who played Episode Shadow, you'll recall that Infinite was obviously someone else. He was the ultimate mercenary. And Eggman's talk about Jackal Squad was like, oh, Jackal Squad was useless, your squad was useless, clean up this mess. And, I mean, personally, for me, if someone started saying, hey, your squad was useless, and everyone just died around me, I'd be like, no. Like, most characters who get treated that way like after all their friends have just been murdered brutally, would probably not like the person insulting them. You know what I mean? So it's just one thing I found very interesting, because Infinite was basically set out to turn against Eggman, the man who hired him for the job, and ultimately got his squad killed, and then blamed Infinite for the death of his squad and called him useless and all that jazz. He then decided to go, okay, I'll be loyal to you. It didn't make sense, and it still doesn't really make sense in my head, really. But that's just how things played out. So I just thought, hey, he's going to turn against him at some point. Clearly, he must turn against him at some point. But no, throughout the whole game until his death, basically. No, he was loyal. He was loyal all the way through. And he was just determined to keep fighting for Eggman. It was just weird to me. I just thought I'd talk about that because I found it really weird. And I'm sure other fans found it weird as well. But most fans probably wouldn't have actually focused on anything like that. Most fans would just focus on the fact that Infinite wasn't Tails from the Game Gear. I think that's what most people were concerned about when this game was released, and most people are still hung up on that fact. So I'm gonna actually do my own video analysing Infinite's psyche to try and cover why he was so loyal to Eggman and all that stuff, and other things about his character that came up in game. But I won't talk about that for now. So the second thing I want to talk about with Infinite is his actual future in games. So again, Infinite was madly advertised by Sega, so we're supposed to assume he's going to be a big deal, right? No, again, like I mentioned earlier, he wasn't a big deal. He was a secondary antagonist in the game, and he didn't really affect the plot too much. Like, yeah, he did, but at the same time, he didn't. If anything, it was the Phantom Ruby that he controlled that did things, but he didn't really feel like he was doing much. He was just floating about like, hello, I'm gonna be a boss fight now. And then that was it. But while he was not really a big deal, Sega certainly saw him as a big deal, which means he's gonna be a big character at some point, right? Well, no. So, Infinite's whole character is built around the Phantom Ruby. The whole character is built around this one thing that has now been completely destroyed, in theory. That Phantom Ruby is not going to be Infinite's anymore. So if he were to come back again, then what would he be? So, honestly, I do like the fact that Infinite was his own character. I was relieved, in a way, to find out he wasn't Tails, because I could, it's just weird to have a character who's, like, completely different from one character, but at the same time they're supposed to be that character, if that makes sense. I like the fact he was something else. I actually like the fact they've introduced a new species. We've never really seen a Jackal character before, so that was cool. But now they've just put that character down the drain. So like when I mentioned about how he's going to be the new Mephiles in my original theory video, he literally has become the new Mephiles, because he's now been destroyed, in theory. At the end of Sonic Forces, we don't know what happened to Infinite. He just kind of disappeared. We're assuming he probably got called back by Eggman. Who knows? It was never made clear. But now that the gem's gone, the Phantom Ruby, which I'm assuming Eggman then took off Infinite, which I don't know what that would do to him, but something happened. We now know that he's not going to be the Infinite we saw in this game. But it sounds like he probably won't ever make a return, like with Mephiles. Mephiles was erased from existence, and now he can never be brought back. And now that Infinite's had his main power source, the thing that defined his character, taken away from him, who is he? His name is based on this gem on his chest. His whole identity is based on this gem, this jewel, and it's now gone. So what is he going to be? I honestly have no idea. This is not me going to turn around saying, oh, he's probably going to do this. I generally have no clue. The only thing I can think of is that he's basically going to be the same character, but weaker. Because Infinite was pretty overpowered in theory, he could just do anything, literally. But now I think if he was to come back in another Sonic game as a villain, then he would probably be much weaker. I'd like to imagine that he's going to be the new sidekick character. So we've had Orbot and Cubot, for example, and I don't really mind them, but I don't like them that much. I like to think that Infinite is going to become the new sidekick, the bad Mobian. That's what it feels like. But at the same time, I think, well, how is he going to do anything? I mean, the only thing I can really think about, not just him being weaker, but maybe he keeps coming back with new powers. Maybe Eggman keeps using him in different experiments. So he throws Infinite back out there and says, you've got a new power, you've got a Chaos Emerald on your chest, you've got a Soul Emerald, whatever, now go and do something. And then he becomes a whole different threat with different powers. So while in the first game he came in Sonic Forces, he was a controller of illusions, he now becomes something else entirely. But again, that doesn't feel right for his character, if you know what I'm saying. Because his whole theme song is based on the idea that he's a controller of illusions. Maybe he gets back his illusionary powers, but I would never know. It just makes me wonder, that's all. I really do want to see Infinite again. He's a great character. He had a lot of potential that was lost in Sonic Forces, and I do wish we'd seen his face properly. That should have been a thing in episode Shadow. The whole fall of Jackal Squad should have been shown, rather than like, oh, Shadow just destroyed them all off screen. No, I want to see it happen. I want to play through it. I want to kill them. Goddamn dogs. So let me know what you guys think. Do you think that he can potentially return as pretty much the same character? Or do you think he's now been scrapped in the same way Mephilus has? Or do you think something else entirely? Do you think he might even come back as Zero? Zero being his masculine form. So do you think he would come back as himself? Or his past self? Do you think he's gone forever? Who knows? All I know is that I would love to see more of him. Maybe he becomes a playable character in Team Sonic Racing that we just don't know about, but who knows? I want to hear your thoughts. I just did this video because I thought it was fitting. And I will be making that video soon about his actual psyche, because that's something I find really interesting too, if it's how I think it is. Anyway, this has been Lord Danny, signing out.